Well, can't complain. I'd say the weather's nice. I mean, the temperature is, although it's a little smoky outside, but at least the temperature's all right. So you get the clean air, but the brutal heat. So
Yes.
can't win, right?
Hey, well, hi everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. And I'm Crystal Weiss. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Question Pro. And I'm joined by the wonderful Patrick Jones. And I'm based in Austin, Texas. And he is based in Canada, but Canada's big. So
Yeah, Canada,
we're adding,
that little guy up there.
we're adding Canada. Are you, Patrick?
So I'm just outside Toronto.
I love that. And, it's really warm in Austin right now, and Patrick does get the cooler air. And so we were chatting beforehand about our woe is life summers, kind of as it is. But we are so excited that everyone is joining us across Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. As I said, I'm Crystal Weiss. I'm the Director of Marketing. And please let us know who you are by dropping a comment or by dropping your name and telling us where you're from in the comments section. We love to know where all of our users and watchers and Question Pro enthusiasts are watching us from. So please let us know. Shout out to a few of our team members who are also in the comments section to engage with you. So if you have any questions that we don't get to on this webinar, please let us know, and they will be in the comments section to answer them. Well, Patrick, I guess we should get started. I know we have a lot of content.
We do have a lot of things to cover. So that's why today is called, Brand Trackers 101. I'm sure at some point we'll have plenty to talk about for, I guess 201 is what the next one would be. So today, we'll begin sort of by introducing a little bit about ourselves. And then,
hold on. Let me share.
Oh, yeah, you might want to. Yeah. Well,
there it is.
There we go. So I don't want to miss out on our excellent cover screen as well, because
there we go.
One of the last things that we finished, and I love the look of it. So that's why the 101.
101 Brand Trackers 101.
So as Crystal mentioned, my name is Patrick Jones, and I am the Director of Research Services here at Question Pro. So I am located just outside Toronto, and enjoying this summer weather as much as I can. So here at Question Pro, we obviously have a industry-leading question and survey platform, but the services team is your expert team that can access and leverage our expertise on the platform. Though again, the platform is quite easy to use, and we have lots and lots of DIY clients. In recent years, we've seen a lot of people say, you know what? How about you help us out with this? And
right.
To take that, whether it be end to end, or sometimes people just say, well, I'll write the questionnaire, but you can program it, or step in and do some of the heavy lifting in areas that maybe are not the best value add for clients, or just something that people don't want to do. So we're happy to take the lead, whether it is just in the heavy lifting or in questionnaire design. And one of the most common requests that we get is for brand trackers and tracking studies. So
I can say that your team is, a 10 out of 10. We gave a ton of props to you guys on Monday during Question Pro office hours when we were talking about how you can make a study for anything, even Taylor Swift. And don't let Patrick Jones fool you. He was a huge piece of that Taylor Swift study that we released earlier this month. And, him and I learned a lot from you guys, and the services team literally saved my life. I would have just done a bunch of scale questions.
So I'm very, very happy to help. So
personal testimonial. You guys could do a survey about anything, even Taylor Swift.
Absolutely. So there's always questions to ask, always things that we can learn. So today we'll be talking. So I mentioned we have lots of different types of tracking studies, and there is some overlap, but we're going to be focusing on brand trackers, and specifically brand trackers as it relates to brand performance. But I saw some of the questions, which we'll get to at the end, talking about some other different tracking studies. So if there's something that you think we haven't covered, happy to hear from you, but know that there is lots that we will intentionally not cover, because we're going to be focusing on brand trackers specifically. So, with that said, we're going to begin by just kind of getting started on what is a brand tracker. So, just defining our terms here nice and clearly. So, when we think of a brand tracker, we think of a brand. I think everybody's familiar with this brand. We see it. No, that first logo, that 1976 one, that one didn't have a lot of legs.
Oh man, I just realized I was like, I need to make my screen bigger. I just put my face so close to the camera. I was like, what is that? Is it an apple?
It does say Apple Computer. It looks like a belt buckle, I think.
Oh, that's funny. Okay. Keep
I
going.
mean, that would be the ultimate Silicon Valley hipster belt buckle right there.
I know it's going to come back around. What's old is new again.
Etsy account starts making and selling them. So here we see the brand over time, but this not a brand tracker. So brands, of course, the Apple logo is great, and they obviously were onto something as far back as 1977, since they haven't changed as much as you might think. But Apple, it's a company. It obviously makes electronics. It manufactures, distributes them, employs thousands of people. But a brand is something a little bit more intangible. So it can be harder. We can see how much a company makes. We can see how many people it employs. But we want to measure a brand or a brand's performance. It's talking about something that's a little more intangible. So when we think of a brand tracker, it's meant to measure various aspects of a brand's performance in whether in the market overall or among certain groups of people over time. Right. So when people think of Apple, they obviously have certain attributes, certain ideas in their mind, and when they think of another brand, whether it's Sanyo or Sony or something else, they might have different. They might make similar products.
Wait, what was that first brand you mentioned?
Do you remember Sanyo?
I don't know what you're talking about. I was like, I didn't think we were that much apart in age.
So I was thinking, okay, Sony is pretty similar, but if you remember in the 90s, Sanyo was like, I guess probably Korean, probably bought by Samsung at some point. Anyway, again, I would have called it your poor man's Sony. Talking about brand attributes. So nobody calls Apple, your poor man's Microsoft. But so these things, they are often difficult to measure. Well, why not? Why don't they? If you said that, Crystal would laugh at you. Why? What does that mean? So we want to analyze key metrics of a brand and basically try to identify areas where it's doing well and areas where we want to improve it. And especially, as we go on, we'll look at specific segments, specific groups of people, so that we can make decisions about, where to invest, our research and development money.
Right.
When we want to make a decision about where the company's direction is, a large part of that is based on people's perceptions of the company and the brand. So thinking of that, I mentioned, making decisions. So that's obviously one of the best benefits is just having data-driven decisions. But, a lot of companies don't invest in brand trackers, and it's because often they don't really recognize the value of them. They think, that I know my company, I know it inside out. I know what we make. So why do I need to go and, I know what the value is. So why do I need to go out and run a brand tracker every 6 months or every 3 months to find out, it will be obvious or it'll be clear where I am.
Yeah. A lot of people, I would say, do brand monitoring and brand engagement and kind of that advertising, social media aspect of brands, right? Like they want to know how people perceive their brand, but they don't do studies around it. It's very much just like qualitative, like social media vibes.
Absolutely. So I got a question just last week, recently. I forget what the term was, but one of our account execs was saying, well, what's the difference between like a brand tracker and like it was like a brand, I think it was a brand awareness study or brand monitoring. And so, well, a brand tracker is more comprehensive, basically. So it'll incorporate or include those elements that you mentioned, like awareness, and it'll focus. A lot of times, one of the key components, and obviously we'll get there, is awareness. But a brand tracker, a good brand tracker, should cover, not only awareness and not only, you're basically what do people think of us, but really be able to dig down a lot deeper than just that. So one of the first benefits that you'll get is just in terms of what your intention as a company is. Maybe you want to make something you believe in, technological innovation, being first to market with things, speed and quality of your technology in accomplishing things. But other people, the market reality is that people see that it is really time saving and really convenient, and you haven't leaned into what people are actually saying about your company, or they say, man, the service sucks. Yeah, it's a good product, but the service is terrible. So it's really understanding what you see, how you see yourself in the mirror as a brand versus how people actually see you. So if you imagine, looking in the mirror versus seeing, a picture of you at a party when you weren't looking, that says what you actually look like. So, and of course, then you untag yourself on Facebook and say, no, that's not what I look like. And then you take your selfie with all of your tweaks. What do you call it to make yourself look better? I, of course, don't know the name for that because I don't use it. But so part of that understanding the realities also means understanding people's needs and their priorities. So again, maybe you do a lot of different things. Maybe your product's good for several different things. But what are the priorities of the people you want to reach? And what are the priorities of people who aren't using it? So it can be just a question of, not necessarily what you do best, but what do people need you for the most? So, and then of course, once you find that out, you want to know, well, how does that stack up against all your competitors?
Right.
I don't think I really have ever had a brand, maybe once or twice. Some companies say, like, we don't really care about our competitors. Pretty much, you're not going to miss out on this, but it is important. I can think of at least once where they really were more focused on their own messaging. And it's like, you want to make sure you include everything you find out about yourself. You want to find out about your competitors, and you want to benchmark that so that maybe you think we have a real problem with trustworthiness, but then you realize, well, every airplane, every airline has the same problem. So you actually don't have a problem. It's just the industry, and you're pretty good. Like maybe you're a little bit higher. You don't really. So you want to make sure you benchmark where you're at with competitors. Because conversely, you might think you have a really great strength, but it turns out that your competitors all have the same strength. So including your competitors is, should be pretty obvious. But like I say, right off the top of my head, I can remember at least one, maybe two times I've had to convince them, no, like, let's just take the time to,
right.
And you may have two or three competitors in mind, that the ones you want to know.
Have you ever found in a brand study that they had competitors they didn't realize, like that consumers thought were their competitors that they didn't realize were competitors?
Definitely. Or, they think sometimes they have a little inflated sense like our competitors are, Apple and Microsoft. Like we're going to find out, well, actually nobody considers us when they consider them. And we are actually maybe, kind of like maybe a B tier, and we need to get, we need to figure out why do people think of us this way. But, I definitely have had run into sort of the ego of maybe companies saying, well, these are our competitors, the top. And then, you guys like, well, maybe you're training to fight the champion, but you still, you still need to get like your blue belt. Like, so definitely, I find that to be more common. And then when we look at awareness and, who they choose to compare themselves against is often, as to your point, sometimes it misses out on something that people will say, no, like this is what I think of. So definitely a pretty common, and that's why we want to make sure we include it and don't forget. And then that goes to, so which people, maybe you think, you have a certain, you're thinking top line, who do we compete with? And then you realize, well, among certain groups of people, maybe we do compete with them, but with other people, they are, they're not even looking at us. So that could be a segment that we wanted to, the young, either maybe it's women or younger people or people who live in the country or whatever segment it is. It could be that, you want to avoid these people. They're waste of your resources and marketing because they don't use your product or they don't need it. Or like you've never thought to target them because you figure they're just like everybody else, but actually they have some unique or specific needs So
Yeah, that was really interesting when we were talking yesterday, prepping for this, talking about how brand trackers can help you find the people you want to avoid, like wasting your marketing spend on. And I had never thought about that. Like, we focus so much on our ideal customer profile. We very rarely think of saying, okay, they might be our ideal customer profile, but these factors mean they will never buy from us.
yeah, absolutely. So,
Yeah.
the next Android phone, how closely are you going to consider it?
It's going to be a -5.
Yeah. So,
um,
and then, if there are changes, so in terms of your marketing, or you're looking at redesigning something, you want to make sure that you have a benchmark before you make a change to compare against, and to help, again, that data-driven decision. Okay, well, why are we, what are we hoping to address by either repositioning the brand, maybe making it a premium brand, or spinning off of a discount brand? There was a whole thing when now you got me all on Apple, but remember when they made the first Apple SE? What was it? The sort of the cheaper version of
like the colored ones, the plastic ones.
Yeah, everyone's, oh, this is a terrible idea. It's gonna kill their their premium brand, but I think Apple did okay. And then, of course, though, if you want to check, did that happen? Of course, you want to make sure that you have a snapshot before and a snapshot after. So you want to track those changes and trends. And again, it all leads to the ability to make decisions. Brands they really elicit intangible emotional connections. But when we make decisions, especially whether you're going, a small company, privately owned, or to a board, you want to make sure that you have the support of data to drive your decisions. So we mentioned, a few of the things that they measure just now. So we'll just very, very quickly kind of talk about some of the key points. So I mentioned brand awareness. So sometimes a survey may be more of a brand awareness survey and less of a brand tracker. And that's really just asking people, when you think of, mobile phones, what brands do you think of? Without prompting them about anything, what's the top of mind? Or out of these 8 companies, how familiar are you with them? So, giving them sort of aided awareness. So showing them, oh, maybe I do know that one. And then maybe, in terms of category engagement, just asking, well, like, do you own a cell phone? Or how often would you say you check your phone? Yeah, when was the last time that how often do you purchase a phone? Kind of getting an idea of, is this somebody who, my mom is on her 2nd cell phone in a decade and she couldn't tell you what brand it is. Is she probably you would not consider her really engaged in that category, not a really high potential or ideal customer profile. So, and then, perception. So we talked about it earlier. Again, what do people think? It could be tangible things, in terms of, how well it works, how safe it is, or intangible things. Do you think of it as innovative? Do you think of this brand as, something that's for people like you, or something for other people? So sometimes perceptions can be based on something that is very, easy to perceive, very tangible, or it can be something that's more emotional.
And doing a brand tracker over time, you'd be able to see how that brand is perceived over time. I'm thinking like the Barbie brand right now, right? Like, came out, it was big and revolutionary, and then kind of was like wompity womp. And then now the movie's coming back out and they're creating more diversity. And so I'm assuming if you had done a brand tracker over time, which they probably have, it's Mattel, like, you would be able to see the perception of that brand over time.
Absolutely. So, this just reminds me of I was just pulling something deep pull. So while I was, as you know, I lived in China years ago for a while, and they launched a flagship store in Shanghai for Barbie, not Mattel, like a Barbie store where you could, get your hair done. It was like a salon for moms and daughters and everything. But they didn't really account for the fact that, at least at that time, cuteness was really the driving thing that girls were interested in, not glamour. So they built this whole store and this whole experience on being glamorous, and it just, landed like what I was going to say. Well, it landed. So, and they ended up closing it, having to retool it, because exactly that sort of perception and understanding the market, and again, the priorities and interests of the market that they were trying to target, they were way, out of sync. So perception over time would maybe tell you, I don't know now, almost 10 years later, if that's still the case, but you would be able to track, okay, well, how do people perceive this brand, and what are they interested in, and get those things aligned if you're trying to target that market. And then, of course, with other brands, you want to make sure, is there somebody, standing on your corner, being the cute brand, or, and, I think, I don't know if they overlap, but I think of Hello Kitty, and, and it was like, okay, like this brand is all about cuteness, and it is on, every backpack, every eraser, every, pencil case. And, meanwhile, Barbie, that's where they want to be, but they're struggling because that's not really, where the market is at there.
Right.
So, and then, when we look at how people feel, well, more importantly, at least the bottom line is, how interested are they actually in making a purchase? So it could be a simple question of how likely are you to purchase a new cell phone in the next 6 months? You can look at consideration by brands.
Mm-hmm.
You're interested in changing from the brand that you currently have. How open are you to change? So we're trying to understand who is the actual pool of people who will purchase potentially purchase our product or service. And then speaking in sort of a little jujitsu flip the other way is loyalty. So how likely are you to consider other brands, or how likely are you to consider changing brands? So trying to understand, for the people who already have your brand or your competitors, again, if people are rock solid Apple users, there's not going to be a lot of benefit to marketing to them and spending a lot of time and energy that could go somewhere else, showing them the newest Chrome or Google phone. So, and then, the sort of next step from being loyal is, how likely are you to recommend this? Are you an advocate of this brand? Are you a big fan? Do you, do you make fun of people who use the other brands like Crystal? What do you call them, greenies?
Okay. The word greenies for people who have Android phones is it's not strange.
I just said I do own an iPhone. It's not that I don't mean to defend to be the defender of Android users, but I have no skin in the game.
You just can't create. Well, and also you just can't create the group chats, man. And I know we could all use WhatsApp, but we don't in the States. We just don't do it. So my attitude and behavior could be tracked in this brand.
So we want to understand. So what kinds of? So we know how Crystal feels about Apple and Android. But so, what are her feelings in other places, or how do we segment that and create, this group of people based on, their attitudes? It could be towards anything, just things like, what you care about, do you consider yourself active? Do you consider yourself a trendsetter?
I'm fiercely loyal to my mattress, like my mattress brand. I'm about it.
So there you go. And, and some people are more loyal to brands than others. Some people don't really pay attention. So, so we have, sort of attitudes and also behaviors. So we mentioned, what sort of things are you engaged in? So we want to look at, runners, or people who, stream 100 hours a week of Netflix or whatever. So also looking at the behaviors so that we can create a profile along with the demographics, age, location. Right. And start to build a customer profile or an ideal sort of client profile, depending on what it is what it is the data is telling us. So either people to focus on, or people to make sure we keep holding on to, or people to avoid. So all this information together can help us to understand a brand's location in the marketplace, and also it's sort of mind share, as some people say. In different groups of the population. So who your core users are that you need to hold on to and keep as advocates, and keep, like here in Canada for a long time, I was away, but BlackBerry people swore by them. The whole crack. People wouldn't want to give them up until they were absolutely dead. Like, so,
that new BlackBerry movie is supposed to be very good.
I know, I do want to see it, and it's like, I want to support local. Not a lot of Canadian movies that people pay attention to. So but of course,
I didn't know it was Canadian.
Of course. That's fun. I guess so. That's a testament to the brand BlackBerry that, like, I would think that only a Canadian would care enough about it to make a movie. I guess it was that popular. In China, it was called Hey Mei, which I thought was kind of a cool sound, which is literally BlackBerry. So
Patrick?
thinking about brand tracker measurements, the goal, of course, is to identify our kind of core or target ideal target audience, and at the same time also learn more about sort of a funnel. So this is what the shape of it, starting large and working our way down. But we also want to learn about the people who aren't using it. So kind of the people on the outside of the funnel. So we sort of touched on this earlier, so we don't need to go over everything that's measured. But we mentioned how sometimes brand trackers, they're not really brand trackers. It's just awareness, or it's just it's just one thing or another. But a proper brand tracker should have some sort of funnel, which means it starts wide and it works its way down to a much smaller group of people to you identify these high potential clients and our core users and advocates, and understand what distinguishes them each step of the way. So if we think of a lot of sportswear, it could be everybody knows Nike, but in terms of category engagement, you might want to target people who actually exercise or go out for hikes and walks. There's plenty of people who know Nike and are not in any way engaged and interested in sportswear or new shoes. So brand awareness isn't the be all end all. So it's a combination of things. And then you look at who, okay, well, how many people own them? Of those people who are, aware of it and potential owners, so people who are doing sports, buying sportswear, aware of the brand, well, what's the penetration? How many people own them? And then again, we get a slice. Well, what are all those people who don't own it? What are they all about? What's the difference? Right. And then we get down to consideration to purchase. So this includes, sometimes consideration could be bigger than penetration, sometimes smaller, depending on like my shoes last for a while. But if you ask me, are you considering the next 6 months to buy them? I'll pretty much say yes every time. But other things I own, everybody owns, phones, let's say the last 2 years. So you might get high penetration, but a smaller number of people thinking about buying it. And then meanwhile, like Coca-Cola, well, everybody has it and everybody's thinking about buying it. So I put that as a funnel, but it kind of depends on, they can kind of switch places sometimes. But you want to know who's thinking about buying it, and again, who's not thinking about buying it. So and find out why not. And then we get down to the loyalty and advocacy. So again, the smallest group of people are your advocates.
Right. And that's what everyone, I went to school for advertising, and that's what everybody was always wanting, were those like brand defenders. How do you create the people most loyal to the brand? But, we were always kind of cautioned against them too, because sometimes it's such a large number with such big voices that you don't want to necessarily rely on them too much sometimes. And they can be your like fiercest, what's the word? Like, I don't know, gaslighters.
Yeah, or detractors. They can switch over real quick. I think of video games when, if a series, builds a big fan base and then takes a sharp turn. Suddenly, sometimes the same people who are telling everybody how great it is are now going out of their way to tell everybody how bad the newest one is. Or there's new Marvel movies, it might be an example. I'm always like, oh, it's okay. But people who don't like it, they're very unhappy. So
they can, when you have kind of that, you can swing from side to side. And so you have to make sure that you're keeping an eye on it.
Yeah, and this is where, you got to watch out for sort of the tail wagging the dog, I guess. So if you're only chasing that core group and you're not finding out about all those people who, are aware of it but didn't purchase it, or purchased it but aren't considering buying it again, or are aware of it, not thinking about purchasing it. If you're not understanding and potentially expanding your base, if you're zeroing in and doubling down on your loyalty and advocacy, you do run the risk of making a change and then you really sort of having the tide go out and being caught with your pants down. So when to run a brand tracking study. So maybe we've heard this ancient Chinese proverb. I didn't realize I would mention I lived in China before posting this. Just a coincidence. Chinese proverb, of course, we know. The benefits of a tree are the shade and widespread, but how do you get those benefits? Well, the best time to plant a tree was obviously before 20 years ago, a long time ago. A new tree is not going to offer nearly as much, but the second best time right now, as soon as possible. So the same thing goes with brand trackers. Their value really multiplies over time. So you want to have one, or you want to have had one for a long time. But if you don't, it can be daunting when you think about setting it up and doing the work, because the value doesn't seem that great necessarily for a single survey, or after a single survey, when you're confronted with the time and energy it took to run it, and maybe the insights are still hard to pin down. To do it again and then again and again can often everything's you're busy, you've got lots of things going on, you think should we really run a survey? The first one didn't tell us that much, but the value really comes from that consistency over time, and the longer you have it, the much more valuable it is. So when we think about getting started, if you haven't started, if you didn't start already, you haven't started a long time ago, or you've got one that's defunct, that sort of has gotten off base, you want to blow the dust off of it and maybe try to connect it to a newer one, not throw it all away. The first things to think about are your timing and your sampling. So with your timing, the best time, as we said, is sort of recurring and continuous. But especially if you're going to be looking at, whether it's marketing or a lot of times research and design. You think about a company that maybe makes a new product only every so often. You think of a new iPhone or a PS5 or PS4, PS5. Before they invest in all that research and design, they should really understand, what the market thinks about, what the priorities are, what attributes that they have already that they make prioritize, that they want to make sure they don't lose. What features are most valued by their hardcore users? What features, Nintendo obviously had a big hit with casual gamers with the Wii, and so it became, I don't know if they had really been in this space before, but suddenly it was the go-to casual gamer machine, and now they've picked up on the Switch all of the indie gaming machine.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, this is like. Before, I guess it had been the GameCube, tried to go head to head with Sony, and I just don't think.
Oh, I remember the GameCube.
So it was actually a pretty powerful system, if I recall. Yeah. But it, again, brand wise, it was like people already kind of had thought of the Nintendo as sort of the underpowered, unique novelty system. So making a really powerful system and trying to drag race with Microsoft and PlayStation. People were just not interested. I'm sure some video game fan will tell me there's so much more to it than that. But that's what I remember is thinking about it at the time, and just thinking it just seemed like a mismatch. That's not you don't necessarily buy a Mario game to see the most cutting edge graphics, and it's about something different. So if you're going to invest in making a new generation, you want to make sure you understand that before you start to go through the R&D process. So you want to make sure you do it before and after, of course, to see, to track that. So marketing, same thing, of course, targeting, who do you target? Who do you spend? What message do you send? Again, you want to make sure that you know the market before you just, again, go with on a whim. So many good campaigns, so much good marketing comes from people just having an idea. But you don't want to rely. You don't want to rely on just like, oh yeah, Bob is really clever, he's really funny. We'll just hand him a piece of paper and a pen, and he'll come up with our next ad campaign. Because especially nowadays with the way ads are so targeted, you want to make sure, and it's very expensive. People just browse through them. You want to make sure you're putting it in the right place with the right message. And then, if you have a scandal or an event, some sort of a public incident, you would hope that you have a tracker before that, because you can never predict when a scandal might come. But I think of Peloton. I want to say during the pandemic, there's like a million things that happened to Peloton. Yeah, which one do you want to talk about? Did somebody die on a Peloton? I feel like they had some, I don't want to just say that right now. I remember when somebody died. But I feel like there was some real safety issues with Peloton. I can't think of exactly what it was.
With the tread.
Was it the treadmill? I'm thinking of the bike. Yeah. Like, how do you hurt yourself on the bike? But the treadmills, yeah, sure. So they had some safety mishaps just as they were like exploding in people's consciousness. Oh, Peloton, everyone knows Peloton. And then, they had a huge, setback in terms of how people saw them. And of course, immediately after they wanted to track, well, what was the sentiment? And you can see the sentiment after the scandal, but ideally, if you're running it continuously and at intervals, then you can see what the difference is from 6 months earlier before the scandal. You can tell, actually, it didn't really impact anything except for, a few small things. Mostly everybody thought it's the people's fault who used it, or, no new, there's no such, no such thing as bad press. People are like,
oh, that's not true at all. Someone in marketing.
I'm always like, oh, like that sounds like something's in the news. I'm like, oh, I should go check it out, even if it's telling me like, this is a terrible thing you shouldn't use. I'm like, oh, I hadn't thought about using it. I hate to say like what was it? Recently, like all the bad news. And I was like, it's been a while since I listened to Kanye West. I was like, I'll check it. It's been a while. So I was on Spotify and I couldn't help but think, I know I'm supposed to be mad and not be thinking of him and not listen to him. But I hadn't even thought of him until his name is suddenly in the news for bad news. And I'm like, College Dropout's good. But
oh man, that's like college album.
I read that album. No.
But going back to your Peloton kind of example was, I don't know if you remember that they released a advertising campaign around the holidays that then Ryan Reynolds spoofed, because it was like this whole thing where this like, if they had done their market research on like their brand and how, like if they had even ad tested that ad, like it wouldn't have caused such uproar. Or essentially like this husband gifted his wife a Peloton because he wanted her to be skinny.
I don't remember this, no.
Yeah. And at the end, she was like, thank you so much. It was this whole Stockholm syndrome thing. And then Ryan Reynolds spoofed it with his advertising agency. And it was one of those moments that they came out of it okay because they partnered with Ryan Reynolds, and it ended up being okay. But it is one of those things where had they done the ad testing and the market research ahead of time, they could have probably flagged that. Mm-hmm. And another situation of their marketing team kind of missing it was when, I don't know if anybody watched Sex and the City, but Big dies while riding a Peloton in season 1.
Not Sex and the City, the new one.
Yeah. And just like that. Sorry. And that's another, if you're really going to go in that brand perception, man, you got to look at those terms and conditions when you are signing those partnership agreements.
Yeah. And that's, it's an interesting question. I've never put that in a questionnaire. Suddenly I think, the question, how would you feel if you received this as a gift? So, that's a good question. I kind of like tuck that down, because there are plenty of products where, maybe a little mixed messaging, like, it's great, good quality. You really want one, but do you want someone to give it to you as a gift? That's you've inspired me, Crystal. This is good stuff. So the next question is just, you can make a great questionnaire. You can have really clever, unique questions that answer, the information that you're looking to find. But if you ask the wrong people, it's really it's not worth it. Like it can be actually damaging. You could pull the wrong insights out of something because you targeted a group of people that have, different views than, the market overall. So in general, you want to get a large sample. When you're just trying to get a top line stat, for like the US or even like a big state or a big group, you can get just a few hundred, 350 people will kind of give you a top line number, more or less 5%, more or less margin of error. But when you start to get into brand trackers, you really want to be able to target groups and to get into an accurate view of 18 to 24-year-old women who have college degrees and exercise at least once a week or something. And you can't do that with just a few hundred people across the board. So you want to get a large sample. Obviously, the budget constraints, I say within reason, especially if, if you have a good structure and a good brand tracker, you could increase your sample and run it again. So if you're running, as we will look at, a pilot project, or you're running it to see that sort of if it's working the way it should, it's collecting what you want, you can run it with 500 people and then later add another 1,000 or another 500, not later where the time will impact the results potentially, like after a scandal. But, you can run it without going so big right away, because you may find that you just don't, there's a point of diminishing returns. So, I mean, I think about some brand trackers I've run nationally in the US or in markets in Asia, and they did like 24, 1,500 to 2,500 respondents. And we were able to cut the data and produce some really distinct differences in the different market segments. So,
Right.
and then it comes down to sometimes, the different types of panels or the different ways. So usually, it's a fresh sample every time. But sometimes if you want to understand your core users, you might want to get the same people and have a community, like a Question Pro community.
And you can do that with Question Pro.
That's right. So we have a community management platform that it works great for this, where instead of getting a new crop of 1,500 people every 6 months, you've got a group that is, engaged, and every 3 weeks you send them 1 or 2 questions, or you beta test something, or you get them to do a diary of just, how they're using your product. There's a lot of ways where you might want to have you want to understand those core users.
Right.
And then I mentioned, the representative or targeted sample. So, your big, fresh group every time. And it could be that you want to just start national sample, gen pop, everybody 18 to 65.
Just gen pop it up.
Yeah, very common. Nothing bad about that, depending on the nature of the product or service. Or you might say, well, we're really just looking for women under 40 and this group. So, but we don't want the same women under 40 with degrees every time. We want to get an idea of those people in general, people like that, what their impressions are. So we want to, get a fresh group every single time. So it's very important to, and then, we'll touch on sample quality, but you want to make sure that you take the time, you have good filters, and you have a good sample. So,
and we can let's talk about sampling just a little bit more, because we do have an amazing sample team here at Question Pro. They can help you find anyone. I always tell my friends, because they ask a lot, like, how did you find that Taylor Swift? How did you find the Swifties? And I was like, well, we ask, like, we look for people in certain cities. We checked IP addresses. We made sure they answered our qualifying questions properly. They didn't speed through the survey. I literally was like, we were talking about it last night at dinner, and I was just like, wow, I sound like kind of a nerd right now, but these are all the facts. And it was like, our sample team, if you wanted them to find like women who have blue hair in a certain zip code, like they would find them for you. Right.
Yeah.
Like, shout out to the Question Pro sample and panel team. They're amazing. And then, of course, what we were just talking about, Patrick, with communities, if you do have, a kind of a group of your advocates or people you want to create advocates with, we have a communities product led by the great Susan, who will be leading our webinar next month. And she'll be talking all about communities versus our QualSite products. So doing those qualitative insights. So do make sure you guys, if you're ever looking for something, we've got you. When Patrick says we do research services, it's all the services.
That's right. And on, and on a platform that, we happen to have built from the ground up. So we know it pretty well.
What?
So of services and also the platform. So we have a variety of, we have a lot of smaller, but still very cool brands. But here are some of the more, more well-known brands that we work with in a bunch of different industries. So some of them use the platform on their own. They use it as a DIY service. And a lot of them, we do research services for, including some brand trackers. And for me, I always think of every time I see Senor Frogs, I think like, really, Senor Frogs? Like,
is that a restaurant?
Yes. Yeah, well,
you're telling me to make my screen bigger every time I lean in.
So it is. If you ever go down to Playa del Carmen or the Mayan Caribbean, Mayan Riviera down in the Caribbean, they're everywhere. And I think, wow, I wouldn't think anywhere else. It just seems like a very unique brand, but it's a good place to go have a drink on a hot day.
There we go.
So these brands, unsurprisingly, not super eager to share their the studies they've run and their results and the insights that they've gained from them. So we wanted to take a look at a case study without giving away anything too valuable or something that might make any of these guys very, very angry at us. We kind of came up with a case study for Brand X. So a medium-sized software and business services company. So this is one that I sort of have in my back pocket as I've worked with them a lot, and I sort of know their issues inside out. So not a massive company, about 100 employees, based in the U.S. with about $12 million in revenue, and relatively new. They started off with a really strong period of fundraising, initial growth, but then sort of ran into an issue of, after growing very quickly, just plateauing sales, high client turnover, and really struggling to engage with new clients. So they sort of just a lot of churn, and sort of a lot of treading water, working hard, but staying in the same place. So they were looking at investing. We talk about that R&D phase in their platform. It was getting a bit long in the tooth, and they were ready to revamp their platform and service offering, but they had never done a brand tracker. Primarily a B2B company, and they sort of started with a great idea and then built it from there, but had never really looked at where they what people actually thought of them, and what competitors or alternatives their clients or potential clients were using. So
I have a question.
Sure.
You just said the term long in the tooth. What does that mean?
I'm getting old.
Okay, I was like, is that Canadian?
I don't think so.
I literally couldn't.
I just came from. I just came from breakfast with my parents, who are So maybe I've just been in the like late baby boomer conversation zone. So that is probably an expression my dad would definitely recognize.
I was just like, I didn't even hear what you said after it. I just
now you made me feel self-conscious. Like it is maybe a dated expression.
Okay. Anyways, but the moral was Brand X really needed to bring some vivation and some understanding of where they wanted to move forward after some heightened growth and success.
To take all that effort, so to figure out how to start getting some traction and growth again. So like I said, they had never done one before. So they sort of were like, well, we know what we do, we know what we're good at, but we don't really know what anybody else thinks. So the goal was, again, they had never done one. So it was to kick it off, and it was to kick it off with sort of an overview of the market and their position within it. And they had a list of all their current clients, previous clients, and then both like prospects they had pitched to, or just the criteria for the businesses that they would, so the market in general. So we created a customized snapshot of the market, really focusing on these three big groups of current, previous, and non-clients.
Awesome.
It was what we talked about earlier. So the whole point was to cover those key points. Awareness, perception, consideration. Sort of with a B2B, attitudes are a little bit different, but sort of we call sometimes suddenly the word not your demographics, but your business demographics. There's a word that escapes me, but thinking about the business, the demographics of the businesses. So the goal was to understand, they knew what they thought was their value proposition, but what do they say is their value proposition, and what do users say is the best benefit, and does that align? And then for the users and the potential users, what are their priorities, and how do they differ again across those different sort of business demographics and differences between users and non-users? And then to collect all of that and identify where is the overlap. So where are people who really really prioritize what they can do and the benefits they provide, and what are the most valuable features, where do they overlap? So and then to do that, and with that, to create a kind of an ideal their ideal clients, and figure out a way, are they targeting them, are they putting the right amount of energy and resources into attracting and maintaining those clients. So the result was that that they were able to basically identify that, for them, their value was in streamlining and improving oversight. So they were able to help businesses do. So I should mention it's a kind of without getting too specific, but it was a logistics platform.
Oh, okay.
So it was a platform to help businesses manage orders, more or less. And what they found was that for them, they really loved it. We have all this, it tracks all this data. You can overview, you have this great oversight. You can drill down into things. It's really detailed. But the benefits that clients describe, they're not necessarily interested in drilling down into things so much as that it saved them time. So it saved them time, and they could scale things and repeat them very well. So
interesting.
So, there's a sort of mismatch in how they see themselves and how the market sees the benefit from them. And then secondly, their ideal candidate or ideal client was growing or medium-sized businesses that had a high volume of orders. So it doesn't matter how much the order is, it's about how many, the volume, how many. So this was, again, something that they sort of had an idea about, but we were able to really quantify how, the number of orders per month, really how it splits out, and how it, the differences between these groups, and how, once you get below a certain threshold, it really has a very little value proposition for them.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
If those orders are worth lots of money, if it's
Right.
a small volume, it's just not the same. And then if a business is too small to benefit from, scaling and streamlining things, because they can just manage it like with an Excel sheet and a guy and, checking it occasionally, the cost of it just didn't measure up. And conversely, if a business is really established and they've established their processes, the cost of switching over also not very valuable. So that's what helped them to really realize this is where the churn was. They were pitching and then landing these different sized businesses, but then after a year or two, these businesses would leave, and they'd have to replace them because they weren't getting the benefit that the sort of ideal business would, or ideal client. So based on that, they were able to double down. So they were able to identify and double down on the features that were most valuable. So they weren't just, we can do all these things, we're going to do all of them better. They knew which ones do we need to really make sure we don't lose and we get better at. And then in terms of their marketing, again, they know who to talk to and what to communicate. And then finally they said, okay, well, now we need to do this repeatedly because, we didn't know where we were. We didn't know who we were looking for. And now we want to make sure that we don't miss, any changes over time, in the marketplace, especially, in something with IT where things are always changing. And sometimes the cost to change brands can be very, very, sometimes it can be very high, but sometimes it can be very, very low. So suddenly, so that was able to essentially go from nothing to help them, take that level up. So they were, doing well for a while, but the benefits of the brand tracker were, tangible in terms of what they designed, tangible in terms of their marketing, and then obviously they want to make the value to, they want to keep that tracker going so that they can really understand any changes. If they hit that plateau again, they'll be able to look at what's happening.
Yeah, that is really, really interesting, because if they did hit that again, they'd be able to go back, okay, well, these are the adjustments we've made. How do you think though, sometimes when you're like, oh, well, we know the playbook, and if they run the playbook and it doesn't work, what do they need to do to adjust that? Do you think if you ask the same questions again in your brand tracker and then you do a bunch of things and they just don't help, how do you adjust that?
Well, good question. So it is important that you don't want to change your brand tracker too much, or you won't be able to link that the results over time. So certainly, if it's well designed, it should help that you shouldn't have to change things too much. But over time, you may you may want to mix up your question types. In fact, the very next thing we're going to look at is some best. I don't think that you did it on purpose, but this is exactly it. So yeah, what are some ways to avoid some of these problems or to deal with some of these issues? So the second part here, a healthy mix of question types. So we definitely want to make sure we include. It's really tempting with scales and numbers. They give us good feedback. Oh, it was a 3.8 average. Now it's a 4.1. We improved. Oh, this was a top 2%. Top two box was 80%. Now the top two box is 68%. Oh, we've lost it. But what you want to make sure you include are a lot of open-end qualitative comments, follow-up comments, have potentially diaries, people talking about their experience using it, how do they use it. So like kind of an ethnographic approach where you really dive into how someone uses it. Hot spots where they're looking, it depends on, in this case, it might be like looking at the interface and, circle all the parts that where you click, where you use most often in the day. Or, if it's an ad, what part of this ad, appeals to you and what doesn't. So this is what we say with a hotspot. They highlight the areas and lots of different creative question types. So sometimes they're harder to analyze, but they help you to drill down when the numbers don't necessarily add up. Like, you can see the bottom line is changing, but you don't see a big change in the survey results. So this is when you want to make sure you have lots of different question types. And to make sure that that you are collecting the data that you hope for, I mentioned earlier, doing a pilot project. So, you run a pilot project, and before you really commit to it, so that you can make sure that the questions that you want to answer are being answered. It's easy to collect lots of data and say, I got so much information. But if you don't start with the end in mind and say, well, what am I looking to do? I'm looking to design a new product. I'm looking to reevaluate my marketing plan. I'm looking to identify new segments. If you don't know what you're aiming to do, then you won't know what answers you're looking for, and you won't know what questions to ask. So you got to start knowing what you want to accomplish, and then run a pilot project and confirm, did it accomplish what I wanted? And then if it didn't, you may find people answer a question and they misread it. It's like, well, I'm not answering what I hoped for. So I know we're getting short on time, so I just want to very quickly go. So I mentioned very quickly, we mentioned sample quality. So all those things you mentioned, filtering, checking on people, make sure that they're not straight lining, make sure they do some quality control questions before they enter the survey. Then when it's over, check the data, confirm that the respondents, look for, lots of different flags to audit the data and clean it. And then using a simple, like I said, a consistent survey structure. If you will find, like, over time, you'll change questions. But if a question result changes wildly, then the question that you change to the next one, it means that now you're asking something maybe different. You might have thought, just wording a little, but if the results should move pretty gradually over time, and you can make adjustments as you go. But you want to avoid, throwing out everything and starting a new brand tracker every year, because you can't link that data over time.
Right.
So there's a lot of steps to take to get started. So we sort of just looked at getting started today. I kind of think of it as 8 main steps, but rather than going into all of them, I say,
Patrick will help you.
Yes. If you think it's a bit daunting, there's a lot of things to cover. We're happy this is what we do. So to us, and we will, that's step 1, and we'll take care of the next steps. And the very first thing we'll do is sit down with you and find out what you need. So we don't do a one size fits all. We always build a brand tracker built around the needs. Like I said, working from the end backwards. So with we figure out what your end goal is, and then work backwards on how to accomplish it.
That's so nice. Yeah. And I think we're going to go into Q&A. If for all of us, for everyone watching, we really appreciate you. Patrick is really, passionate about this and spent a lot of time putting this together and really does think about these. And so I am going to take the slides down and just ask you, we've got about 5 questions to go through.
Sure. So I apologize.
We don't have a meeting.
Of course, I agonized over not having enough or whatever, and then of course, it's easy to talk about Taylor Swift for an hour.
So Kyler Gonzalez.
A few minutes, no problem.
Okay, perfect. So Kyler Gonzalez asks, how does brand tracking add value to brand sustainability?
So
I think we've talked about it a little bit, but can you expand on?
I mean, first and foremost, it's a performance monitor, so it's monitoring
Right.
the strength of the brand over time. So in terms of like the sustainability of the brand, like not thinking about sustainability, environmentally, but just the brand lasting. I mean, it gives you, if you have a scandal and you see it go off a cliff, you'll know why. But if it's just over time, it starts to decline. Again, if you're not running a brand tracker, you just sort of notice over each quarter you've been declining. You don't have a way to track that performance. So first and foremost is just that it measures your performance over time, and it gives you not only the top line, the performance, but it also looks at what's driving that performance. So like we said,
Right.
those different question types that tell you, not just how people feel, but why they feel that way, and the attributes that they associate with it, if how strongly they associate them, if those attributes are declining or changing. Thinking of things that are premium and then they start to lose that premium edge, like they start to become sold at Target or something, and they think, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So yeah, basically that's what it does, is it focuses on brand sustainability, and it tracks changes and benchmarks those against other changes in the market and with competitors. Um, yeah.
That's great. So one of these is actually interesting because it kind of combines you and I together, because this is how I would think of brand tracking from a marketing and advertising and kind of a digital marketing perspective. So I'm interested on your take on this. So Matt Renee asked, what's your opinion on share of search as an alternative to traditional brand tracking? And share of search is the volume of search queries for a given brand online. And that
Yeah.
is how a lot of, I would say, brand like marketers whom don't have a market research background track their brands. And
Yeah.
so, how is there the difference, or is one better than? I mean, obviously, one's not better than the other, but I mean, do you find that you kind of come up against that with marketing teams sometimes?
Well, it's like I said at the beginning, there's, brand awareness studies, and and
Right.
then a brand tracker should go deeper into, again, what's driving,
Mm,
people's actions and people's attitudes. So I think that it's more, they're not really one versus the other. It's more that, share of search is like a metric that you could use as part of a brand tracker study. Um,
ah, okay.
but you would want to drill down into, who, again, like, who's searching, like, you want to connect it to their intention. Are they doing, like, what kind of consideration and intent to purchase is coming
Mm,
from a search. um, you know and then back down to, all of the sort of relationships between, brand attributes and versus competitors. One thing, well, I guess share of search you can apply to your competitors as well, but I'd
yeah.
say
Oh, yeah. We do that.
yeah, you want to make sure that you're able to really get behind what's driving that. So yeah, I just think that would be a good metric. I
But
still
so it's a metric inside of a brand tracker, not itself at, don't use itself as a brand tracker.
it just won't tell you anything. It's I guess a lagging indicator. Like, it would tell you where you're at, but not how you got there.
Okay, interesting. Love
Uh,
that. And we have a great question coming in from YouTube. What are some of the emerging trends and technologies in the brand tracking space?
well, I will say that, of course, everybody's like, oh, AI. Um, I don't. I'm just thinking of relating it to AI. I guess we can touch. One thing is, I am not. That's not AI. Is I do think that social media listening, maybe kind of with a little help from AI, has gotten a lot better
Mm,
at. So we have obviously like awareness and category engagement, questions that we can apply. But to the previous question, there are other metrics to understand, what people are, what behaviors people are taking in relation to a brand, like searching for it or
right.
posting about it. And it used to be that it, like the search, the listening, it just could never tell what the sentiment really was. So
Ah,
we're talking about brands. And they would always tell. I don't know how many times I would go to these demos, and they would, oh, this is the next generation. It's really good. And then it was like, it just didn't do what it was intended to do. And you had to do so much work to try and train it to understand what the nuances. And it was just like, you might as well just hire somebody to just read all of the things where the word Question Pro was mentioned in for like $15 an hour and do it faster and better. But I do
kind of like a mechanical Turk from Amazon.
Yeah, like I do think that so social listening and then sort of AI sort of augmented social listening is definitely something that is sort of like the ball is really rolling now on being able to track sentiments and perceptions outside of just building a questionnaire. So where you ask people, specific questions you've come up with, and you can now listen and get the themes that they're talking about, like openly and freely. So rather than structuring, these attribute questions like, how strongly do you agree with these statements, and having it about innovative, trustworthy, reliable, all these different things that maybe they think these are the metrics we need to measure about our brand. They can now, the idea is now a client could get the sentiments and the sort of attributes that were associated with the brand from social media and identify, oh, okay, these are the ones, reliability, trustworthiness, like everybody's like, of course, social media does tend to be a little negative. Again, kind of complimentary. You're going to find that people mostly complain, but it still is a way to identify, without using a questionnaire, the sentiments and attitudes towards the brand and the competitors. That's something it's existed for a little bit, but it's never been very good. And I think now
yeah, I mean, as long as I've worked in marketing, which has been 15 years, we've always, because social media started about the time I was graduating college. It was taking off about the time I graduated college. And it definitely, it used to just be like keyword tracking.
Yeah.
Right. That really was what you got. And now it's kind of like, it's definitely that sentiment has started to run into there. And shout out to another one of our products. If you have, frankly, Question Pro's got it all, but we do have a reputation tracker involved in our Question Pro CX suite. So if you are looking for that, we do have that.
All right. So that's one I didn't know about. So very
fun facts.
Yeah.
And then if you, there's this one we talked about last night, and this will be our last or yesterday when we were getting ready for this. This will be our last question. So if y'all have any questions, please put them in the comments and we'll get to them. But this is going to be our last kind of filled out question. If you're ever looking to join a Question Pro webinar, please make sure to register because you can ask us your questions ahead of time. And that kind of helps us kind of queue up the content and know what people are looking for. So that's where we're getting some of these questions now. And the last one is, how can brand tracking help rebrand an organization without losing loyalty from existing customers?
Yeah. So again, this is exactly what it's intended to do. So, as we said, the idea is that before you make any changes, you want to make sure to get a good gauge of where you are in the market, who your biggest advocates and loyal users are, what they think of your brand, and then it could be the market in general or specific groups. So it may be that you feel like you want to expand. It could be brand repositioning where you want to kind of expand out and get and loop in a sort of adjacent segment from the one that you already have. So you want to look at, okay, how do we measure this segment of users that we already have and what's important to them, and how do we look at this segment that's next to them and kind of find the overlapping sort of priorities and values, and then create a brand that overlaps those, without alienating the original group by focusing on the second group. And then afterwards, so after you go through a rebrand, maybe it could be the opposite. It could be that you want to you want to sort of start fresh and really like I think at least in Canada,
you went through a scandal.
Yeah, or all these airlines, they always seem to go out of business, and there's another discount airline, and they always, it's like, okay, now it's Swoop or whatever. Like it's like, okay, colorful logo. Yeah. Oh, it's always here in Canada. Like, how cheap can you get me to the Caribbean? It's always the same thing. And you think, okay, like really, like, I don't think you need to spend any money because it's the same exact, like, it's the same sentiment. But if you were to start, a new brand or a rebrand fresh, then you would want to be able to compare again your sentiments, and all of the sort of different measurements that we looked at in the original brand, and then in the new brand run the same tracker and look at where you are, and if you're not landing with the same message, or at least you're not being your message is not being heard the same way, then you can adjust sort of whether it's about the marketing, the branding, the logo, whatever it is. All of these things leave impressions on people, and
Right.
And if you're able to compare where you were and where you are now, you can sort of recognize where you've lost the thread. So basically, this is what you want to use a brand tracker to do, and you want to make sure again that you have it running consistently, so that if you start to make changes to your messaging, to the products that you offer, to the groups that you target, you're able to track the difference from, like it could be 3 months, could be 6 months, but at a regular interval. And you don't want to just go haphazardly, regular interval, because sometimes it's seasonal. It's like, well, everybody's interested in pumpkins around September, and suddenly they're just way less interesting after October 31st. So you want to make sure that by having it consistent and over time, you can also measure cycles in potentially your market or your product, and then start to again look at what's driving the differences from one to the next to the next. So that's really what it does.
Yeah.
So in terms of sustainability, rebranding, it's kind of like, how does it help? Well, that's exactly how it helps.
I love that. And of course, you can always come ask us for help here at Question Pro. We have a full suite of products, and Patrick Jones leads one of our main, helpful verticals, which is research.
Client facing. So yeah, I get a lot of people asking me random questions. What about this question or this? So yeah. You can do a lot.
And he always, indulges the marketing team on the antics that we want to ask out there in the world. And so we're very grateful for him. But if you are looking for survey software, employee experience software, customer experience software, or high-end research, you can always come to Question Pro, because we've got a full suite of research product lines, but also an entire platform for all of your insights needs. Patrick, anything to say before we go?
No, I think like I said, we covered a lot. We went a little bit over time, but I'm glad. And who knows, the Question Pro 2 brand tracker 201, maybe we've laid the foundation. And I got to write down that question now about if you receive this as a gift, how would you feel? I like that. The Peloton, I think it's a nice gift, but I suppose that you might send the wrong message.
Right. And for everyone who pre-registered, we will be sending out a brand tracker guide that Patrick and our marketing team have put together. It's like 30 pages. It's pretty in-depth, y'all. And so for everyone that pre-registered, you'll be getting that in your email by the end of the week. If you are looking for the brand tracker guide, please leave a comment in the comments section and we'll make sure to get it to you. It's going to be really intense. I felt like I learned in the last 3 days. I've learned a lot from reading that and doing this, but it comes with worksheets, questions. It's going to be really everything you need to get started on your brand tracker. But then trust me, you'll probably need Patrick still.
So that's the goal. Yeah, you can hit the ground running. So, and I'll be sharing it, I'm sure, on my LinkedIn, in the next 24, 48 hours. So, check your feed.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Patrick. I'll chat with you later.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Bye.